Hi everyone, this is Ali Greymond. Welcome to OCD Live, and let's get to some questions. So the first set of questions I have, it's from the same person. You know who you are. The question is: after recovering, can OCD come back someday? Theoretically speaking, yes, it can come back. Practically, probably not. Because when you are recovering, you are understanding how OCD works. In this channel and on all my books and sessions and everything that I do with clients, I always try to make sure that the person understands the mechanics of OCD. Because OCD is very predictable in how it operates. So if you know how it operates, if you know that, okay, if I get a random thought, if I start paying attention to this random thought, it's going to get worse. And if I do this for months or for years, it's going to get really, really bad, and it's going to be hard for me to dig myself out of it. So if you know this, and if one time in your life you have already gone through all the trouble and all the pain of digging yourself out of it, it's extremely unlikely that you will let yourself get to that situation again. Will you get random thoughts? Yes. Will most people get random thoughts? Yes. It doesn't matter if you have OCD or not. People get weird thoughts all the time. It's just that the people that don't develop OCD, they don't react. So they're less sensitive, generally speaking. They don't care as much, so it doesn't create a situation where they're worried about it all the time. Rather than a person who eventually gets into an OCD situation, they just react so much and they care so much. So you could, but I mean, I haven't seen anybody who has gone through my program have OCD come back full force. From time to time, especially in the beginning, as you first get over OCD, you have a period of maybe, I would say, 6 months to a year where you don't have OCD anymore. But every month or so, you'll get a random thought because your brain is checking, is there anything important? Are you in some sort of a danger? So those things happen, but as long as you stay cool and collected and you say, no, I'm not paying attention, it doesn't develop into an OCD, it just goes away. So it becomes like the same as for any other person on planet Earth that gets a random thought but doesn't pay attention to it. So another question is, are OCD thoughts opposite of who we really are? And are they all fake? Yes, they are all fake. They're opposite to who you are, and they usually the person gets stuck on what they care about the most. So they have a thought of the opposite of that, and then they get scared. So, for example, a person who is family oriented will worry about something happening to the family, and that can develop into a bunch of different types of OCD, but that would be the underlying root of it. Now, a person who is, maybe they care about family, but they care about finances more, they worry about finances more, they'll develop OCD that's financially based. So they can even have a worry about the family, but it would be on a financial, from a financial standpoint. So it's what you care about the most, and in that way it is the opposite, because what you care about the most you will never want to destroy or hurt in some way, right? But OCD plays on that and makes you worry about that, because if you were worried about something that wasn't so important to you, you wouldn't be worried about it. You'd be like, oh, I don't care. But because it's so important, you start to buy into it. Okay, so another question I had is, how do you know you are recovering? So if when it's important to kind of keep a journal, just don't become obsessive about it, because it can create another obsession all in itself. But keeping a journal with how high your anxiety is today. So out of 10, 10 meaning you're not eating, you're not sleeping well, you're just all, I mean, the world doesn't matter, all that matters is OCD all day long, that's a 10. Somewhat, that's a 5. Usually when I see, like when I start working with people, they're at about 7 or an 8, somewhere there. Sometimes at 9 or 10, but usually about 7. Maybe more closer to an 8. Um, so you have to rate yourself from the beginning where you are on that scale, and keep a log of it. You don't have to record every thought, but I would actually probably advise you not to record the thoughts. And if you do record them in a general terms, like for example, thought about driving and hitting somebody. The next day, thought about driving and hitting somebody, right? So because in that way it will help you see that, okay, I couldn't have killed all these people, so that means none of it is true. This means this is OCD, and it kind of encourages you to keep going and keep disregarding the thoughts. But in addition to that, keeping a log of how you are, where your anxiety is every single day, will show you how it's going down, and it will give you an actual real facts of that you are recovering. Now, day to day is I mean, you can't take 2 or 3 days and out of those 3 days judge how you are progressing, because during those 3 days a million things can happen that can stress you out, that can create unpredictable kind of situations, and all of that can sway your OCD to be worse than it really normally is, but because of the circumstances, right? So I would say keep the log, but see it on a week-to-week basis. How were you this week? And then you can make a judgment. Well, why was I this week? Was there something happening? If there was nothing happening this week and you were not doing good, that means you were seeking a lot of reassurance. Usually, this kind of situation happens when a person is seeking reassurance from within themselves. So they're not actively asking anybody, they're not doing any compulsions, but they're going over the situation in their mind, and that makes them feel worse. So start recording on how you're feeling, and then you can see your progress, and you will see that, because a lot of the time too, it's hard to know because we get used to a good thing very quickly, or a better thing anyways. So when you start out and you think, okay, this is so bad, this is 10 out of 10, and then you continue and you are in reality at like a 6 out of 10, but you're so used to being now on this new level of 6 out of 10, and it's bothering you just the same as the 10 out of 10 bothered you, right? I hope you understand what I'm saying. But basically, it's hard to judge it when you are in the situation, because whatever situation you're in, it feels like this is the worst one. So, but still, as much as possible, try to go back and see, okay, this is how I was feeling then, this is how I am feeling now. Also, you can do something to help that, is to note also how many hours a day were you worried. So were you worried, like spending time worrying about it? Were you worried, say, in total, when you add up all the times throughout the day, for 10 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours? And that will also give you an overview of how you are recovering. And again, if you feel like you are not recovering, you're getting worse, correct the behavior. It means you are seeking reassurance. Stop seeking reassurance, or at least try to. If it's self-reassurance, keep busy. Be around people. Be in a situation where you cannot have time to think and analyze in peace. Because that's right now the worst when you have OCD, is to have that time to yourself, because if you're not strong enough to resist and you do have that time, it's very easy to fall into self-reassurance. So the next question I have is, why do anxiety spikes of some exposures take much longer to fade than others? And the reason is the level of reassurance you're seeking from yourself or from others, and also the level of anxiety and the level of stress you experience. So for example, if your main theme is, say, harm OCD, right? If you are experiencing a very kind of thought that matters a lot to you, or a situation that is very scary to you, rather than a situation that's like somewhat scary, those situations that are very scary will take longer to fade, because your mind flagged them as more important before. Right? So maybe you were in this situation and you reacted with much more anxiety before, or you took the anxiety seriously rather. So all of these things kind of contribute. If the situation is mild, so it only gives you, say, a 7 out of 10 level anxiety, then it's going to fade a lot faster than a situation that's a 10 out of 10 anxiety, because 10 out of 10 anxiety is your mind thinking that you are in extreme danger. 7 out of 10 anxiety, it's like, it is dangerous, it's 6 out of 10, it's kind of dangerous. So that's kind of the difference. But you have to react the same way, and also the length of your reaction. So from the point of when the situation first hit, like when the exposure started, the exposure to the OCD situation, So when the exposure first started, and you started to pay attention to it, to when you stopped paying attention to it. If that time was a week of the, like, not of the anxiety, but of you paying attention to the anxiety and taking it seriously, if that time was a week, it's going to take you a week to recover. For people who don't have OCD, if they experience a weird, strange thought, it takes them seconds, and it takes them seconds to recover, you know. So they don't, it doesn't last as long because of that. But if you pay attention to it, and if it's a topic that's already very important to you and your brain has flagged you, it's going to stay a lot longer. But again, the recovery is the same. It's just the length of recovery, and sometimes, unfortunately, it takes longer than others. I'm just going to rephrase the next question slightly. And the person is asking about it being detrimental to recovery to be afraid of experiencing the anxiety spikes, and because that leads to avoidance. And is there anything the sufferer can do to help get through exposure and response prevention? So, what you can do is prepare yourself for a spike. So if you can, if it's somewhat a planned exposure, where say you're going to a store and you know you're going to get anxiety, or you're going to drive and you know you're going to get anxiety, the way you can prepare for it is by saying, I know I'm going to be in this situation, I know I'm going to get anxiety, but I will choose to not pay attention to it when it happens. So kind of going over it in your head before you're actually in the situation really helps. And that will also stop the being afraid of experiencing anxiety, because when you go over it in your mind, the situation, as if it's already happening, so like imagining it, right? You see yourself getting anxiety, you see yourself getting worked up, you're imagining yourself getting worked up, getting anxiety, all this stuff. And then when you actually get it, you remember that, 5 minutes ago, you imagined yourself being in this situation. So it stopped being that scary, right? And preparing yourself, because preparing yourself for a situation will greatly reduce your anxiety. And also preparing yourself for what happens after the situation. So, for example, I'm going to react with anxiety, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to it, get all worked up, and then it's going to turn out to be nothing, like it always does. Your anxiety starts to go down when you think that way, because you see through the OCD, you see to the other side. It's like a bridge, you see to the other side, and you stop being scared to go on the bridge. So another question I have is the harm OCD the worst type of theme? And what is the recovery rate for my clients with harm OCD theme versus other themes? I would say harm OCD is the most common theme there is when it comes to OCD. Because if you think about it, let's look at the themes, okay? False memory OCD always has to do with something bad happening, except for things like cheating OCD, and maybe religious OCD, which can also go under the umbrella of harm OCD, because you're still causing harm, right? Like if the situation was true, the fears are harm related, but it's more in a metaphysical way, rather than in directly hurting somebody way. But other than that, most of the other themes have to do with physical harm, such as driving OCD, like what I categorize as harm OCD, like being afraid of knives, sharp objects, things like that. Also, I mean, there's so many, right? I don't want to give you guys any ideas and make the situation worse, because the more themes you get, the kind of sometimes people can grab onto it. So I don't want to give you guys an OCD spike, but basically harm OCD is the most common OCD there is. I can't really think of one more common. It's too bad that in the news and in the media they only mention cleaning OCD, and cleaning OCD itself is a harm OCD, because why is the person cleaning most of the time? Not all the time, sometimes it's not, but most of the time the person is cleaning because they're afraid that if they don't clean it, maybe there's going to be some chemical that's spilled, or maybe somebody's going to get hurt or something like that. So again, we're talking about harm. Then in terms of the recovery, so in terms of is it the worst one, I don't think it's the worst one, it's the most common one. It really, across the board, you can get worked up over everything and anything. It just depends on, again, like how I said in the first question, right? It depends on what is your most sensitive area. And OCD grabs on to whatever that most sensitive area is. As human beings, we're worried about causing harm to other people or whatever. Um, so that is usually where OCD kind of ends up. But no, I wouldn't say it's the worst. Anxiety goes up for everybody pretty much the same, going to the level 10, level 9. So it doesn't. I find that actually the ones that are the hardest to get rid of are the philosophical type of OCD, where it's thoughts about the future or thoughts about like something intangible that you can never prove one way or another. I find that those ones are very difficult for people to deal with and very difficult to let go, because they provoke you to think more about it, and the more you think about it, the more worked up you get, and that whole story. So, but no, I find it's similar with the recovery. Just like I said, as long as the person puts their effort into recovery, 95% of people recover. So I mean, about 95. It's not like I'm counting every person and getting percentage, but most people recover. I can only think of maybe just a few people who didn't recover, and maybe it was just because it wasn't their time, they weren't ready. So it's if you're in a situation and you have OCD, there's only one way to recover from it. Some people recover faster, some people recover slower, but everybody who puts effort into their recovery and actively disregards the thoughts will recover. And then if the person is not ready, and if the person is continuously seeking reassurance, maybe it's not their time yet. But it doesn't mean that they will never recover. It just means that it's going to take longer, or maybe they're not ready to even start. They need to get a deeper understanding of how OCD works, and that will help them project forward in the recovery. I also see a lot of the time with harm OCD, as well with other types of OCD, where a person will have kind of a slow recovery, and then all of a sudden either something happens in terms of they feel like, okay, you know what, that's it, I have to recover, and then they stop caring about the thoughts as much, and they just project themselves forward. They're taking that leap of faith, and they're doing the exposures, and they recover fast. And then I see people who are recovering fast throughout the whole time, and then have a setback, and then start recovery slowly. So it's different for everybody. There is no set time of recovery. I mean, I can kind of project recovery just because I've experienced like I'm experienced in helping people recover, right? But generally, everybody who wants to recover recovers. So that was the show for today. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. You can email me privately at info@youhaveocd.com. You can also leave a comment below and let me know if you have a question for the show. If you do have a question, please state clearly in the email whether you would like me to answer it on the show or not. I prefer to answer it on the show, and the reasons being is that, first of all, I can talk a lot more than I can type in an email, because I get so many emails. And second is, it really helps for other people, because there are a lot of questions that I can't think of myself, that are very thought-provoking and very informative to other people who are suffering with the same thing. So please ask your questions, and I will reply in probably the next show. If I already have too many, then I'll let you know that it's going to be the show after that, and then I'll reply in the show after that. If you can't wait that long, then I'll just reply in the email. But just mark it clearly so I know. If you would like to do a private recovery program with me, that's available on youhaveocd.com. There's also books available there. There's a lot of free information, so please feel free to check it out. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.